Joining us now, New York Times Washington correspondent Charlie Savage. He's bylined on the piece, and Ashley Parker and David Frum are still with us. So, Charlie, help us understand what this chief of staff to Tulsi Gabbard was trying to do.
So we're talking about Joe Kent. He's also the pending nominee to lead the National Counterterrorism Center. Right now, he's serving as chief of staff to the director of national intelligence. Your viewers may recall in mid-March, Trump issued a proclamation saying he could use the Alien Enemies Act, a wartime deportation law, to summarily expel people from the country without due process and normal immigration hearings. And he used that power to send several hundred men from Venezuela to a notorious prison in El Salvador. And after that, courts have shut down his use of that law for further deportations so far. It emerged after that proclamation that it relied on a key factual assertion by Trump that Venezuela controlled this gang that the intelligence community thought was false. In February, the intelligence community had been asked to look at that issue and had reached the opposite conclusion. Venezuela's government does not control the gang. And that's important because you can only use that law if you're dealing with an invasion by a foreign state. And so gang members coming here of their own accord doesn't do the job to unlock this power. So after the Times had reported on that earlier intelligence assessment, Joe Kent asked the intelligence community, directed them to redo the intelligence, to come up with a different memo, one that could not be used against Trump, to criticize him for having said this thing that the government actually thinks is false. And then further, when the first draft came in, demanded some rewriting for that purpose and edits. The odd thing about all of this is that second memo is out. It was released under the Freedom of Information Act because Kent had it declassified so that Stephen Miller could use it, which set in motion this chain of events that it became public. And even with the rewriting that he demanded for this apparent, what appears to be, political intervention, the thing still contradicts Trump and still is very bad for the administration. But apparently before these edits, it was more so. We do not know what the pre-edited version looked like.
Charlie, do we have any idea or are there any questions about whether this has been done in other areas of intelligence?
Well, we're only a few months into this administration, so who knows? I don't have an answer to that.
David, after this was released and after there was reporting, or after reporters got a handle on this document showing that the intelligence community did not agree with the assessment, did not have evidence to back up the assessment that the Venezuelan government was directing Tren de Aragua, Tulsi Gabbard fired the intelligence officials who oversaw that memo.
And this is all closing around one final and most dangerous possibility, because the people who are involved in rewriting this memo are serving a White House aide, Stephen Miller, who speculated about repealing habeas corpus altogether over large parts of the country for all people. Everyone, when habeas is gone, anyone can be detained, not just aliens, not just alleged criminal aliens. Anyone can be detained.
There's also a polygraph operation, Ashley, from Kristi Noem's DHS to try to suss out anybody that might be talking to reporters, any leak information that they can find. This is all part of a broader agenda, it seems, from the administration to co-opt all of the levers of government under Donald Trump's control. Obviously, they had a hard time with leaks during the first administration. They don't want to deal with that again. But part of the leaking process is not just to embarrass a president, it's to expose potential wrongdoing or things that the administration, any administration, is trying to hide from the public.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. They did have a particularly hard time in the first Trump term. There were these warring factions who, for whatever reason, often found it more effective to get the president's attention by playing out their fights in the media. But the Trump administration, the first one and then this one, is hardly the first president or administration to deal with leaks. And as you point out, Katie, there's all manner of reasons why people share information, including whistleblowers, including people who are deeply concerned by what they are seeing. And it has been striking the level to which this administration this time around is so determined to ferret out these leaks. To give you a more trivial example that I think is telling, here at The Atlantic, my colleague and I published a story about Secretary Doug Burgum at the Department of Interior, how political appointees there were being asked to bake fresh chocolate chip cookies. And we found out later, even there was a leak investigation into how that story came to be. Now, I don't believe it involved polygraphs, but this is something they very deliberately want there to be a chilling effect on people's willingness to go to the media with their concerns.
And Charlie, how has that chilling effect affected the intelligence community?
Well, I think people are very scared, which is the point, of course. And there's been announcements of criminal investigations, including around the reporting on this Venezuelan gang situation. Both a New York Times story and a Washington Post story have been announced as the subject of leak investigations by the Justice Department. That's clearly intended to send a message that people should not talk to reporters even about unclassified information, because they're going to use the tools they can to hunt down people who are putting information out to the public about what's happening inside the government.
What about national security? Is that still the paramount issue here? I mean, when you have the chief of staff directing the intelligence community to rewrite a memo, when you have truth tellers targeted by this administration, I wonder if national security is still the top goal. I mean, obviously it is for the individual agents and individual analysts, but from the administration's point of view, does that send a message, Charlie?
Well, certainly when they're using tools of leak investigations on news stories that do not involve classified information, maybe the chocolate chip cookie thing we just heard was a more extreme version of that, but there's all kinds of ways in which information about what's happening inside the government reaches the American public every day through means other than sanctioned press releases. And to the extent that they are treating ordinary run-of-the-mill disclosures as a threat that needs to be investigated, that certainly does not have a national security hook to it, and looks more just like clamping down and controlling.